Hi, good morning everyone. My name's Coby Reynolds. I'm a former University of Ballarat Bachelor of Education student, now known as Federation University. Some of the changes have happened since I've been away. I graduated in 2009, so I've been teaching now for about 8 years. And I've got a little bit of an interesting experience, maybe not as a more traditional approach as you leave education. So I'll talk a little bit more about what I do. Coming to you from Hong Kong this morning. Which is why I'm obviously recording my video, because of the time difference a little bit. So the aim of today's session is to sort of give you a bit of an understanding, a little bit about some tips or some tricks, some of the things I wish I'd known sort of coming out in my final year of education, some of the things that helped me, and some of the things I wish that I did or should have done in those sort of times, and that sort of time that we have. So hopefully you enjoy the session. I'm going to go through a few things as I mentioned. Just before we start though, I thought I'll just give you a little bit of background on me. As I mentioned before, I graduated in 2009 from the then University of Ballarat. And I worked very close to Ballarat at a place called Murniong Primary School for the first 2.5 years of my teaching career, which was a really great start. It was a nice small school. I could really focus on my teaching and education development, and it was really interesting to sort of consolidate a lot of the practical things that we do at university. So that was a really good start for me. Back in 2012, I took up a job offer in the Middle East, in quite an interesting environment at a school called Victoria International School of Sharjah. Sharjah, many of you may not have heard of before, but most of you have probably heard of Dubai, which is its neighbouring emirate. So still a part of the country of the UAE, just a different ruling emirate, which is right next door. So that particular school at the time was running the AusVels curriculum, which some of you may know, may not. That was more of an interesting model over there, because we're teaching an Australian curriculum essentially to students who are generally from the Middle East area. Obviously we had some other students there which were from Australia. Others were generally from your Middle Eastern countries as well. So a very interesting experience and a very good experience for me. So then from 2012 to 2016 I worked there for 4 years, which sort of gave me a really different outlook on education. That education is a little bit more global than probably what we do think of, especially when we're working at local schools back home, or government or private schools at home. And education in Australia in general is actually quite well known around the world. It's generally quite well sought after in the way that we teach. Our pedagogy and our instructional practice is generally quite highly regarded, and that's generally something that we as graduates didn't really know at the time, so our knowledge was quite good in that area. So it was actually quite an interesting thing. We used to get lots of people from the Ministry of Education in the UAE coming out and seeing what we do at our school, which was generally just what we were doing, what you guys would do on a normal basis. But for those particular cultures, a really different outlook on education. And so moving on from 2016, so late last year, made the move to Hong Kong, working at a similar type school with the international circuit, I say. And I've been working here as a grade 5 teacher, and the way that it's set up here is a little bit different to more your traditional classroom. I end up actually, it's more of a, say, middle school model here, even though I'm a primary teacher, where I end up teaching 2 classes. And a part of those 2 classes is I teach them for English, which is normal, very, very loosely based around the Australian curriculum and British curriculum sort of mixed together for the English side of things. And then the other aspects I teach is the science aspects here, which is a little bit different. Normally we'd run it more of an inquiry model sort of thing, but we're moving towards more of a primary years program, the PYP program that you may have heard of as an international curriculum. It is a little bit challenging at the moment. One of the key things is, because I have 2 classes, which generally for us as primary teachers, we're teaching a generalist subject, we teach all subjects. So when the students, for example, aren't with me, they might be with my co-teacher, a Chinese teacher in the other classroom, where they're learning all of their instruction in Chinese. in a more traditional probably approach to, say, my classroom here. So it's a little bit of a brief intro, and might talk a little bit more about how that sort of looks a little bit later. But yeah, sort of for today, I want to give you a bit of an understanding of some tricks and some tips to help you guys in your final year, and sort of anything that I wish I'd known a little bit, in that final year of education, and some tips that help you get started as teachers in your teaching career. So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about sort of my experience a little bit in my final year. I know some of the big key stresses for graduates is, am I going to get a job? Where am I going to get a job? Is it going to be too far? Am I going to have to drive somewhere? All those things come up, and it's always, oh, this person's got a job and this person got one. Congratulations, and you still don't have one. One of those things is your jobs will come, and one of those things is don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. Try and find schools. Your first school that you start at will always be the first school, and it's a great start for you to consolidate your own practice and your theory behind a lot of things. And that's sort of something that I really liked my start into my education life, I suppose, as a teacher. At a smaller school, we had 150 students. And I look back on that now, and I think that was a really good start for me to really consolidate what I do, to find my own understanding of what I believe that is, what I am as a teacher as well. So some really good ideas and to sort of help with that is just be confident in what you're doing as well. As graduates, we always presumed that we didn't have enough understanding of what's going on. You do placement and you talk to these teachers and you go, how do they fit everything into that day? It takes time, it takes practice, and that's one of those things. So in my final year, I made some contacts with some friends of mine who were teachers, and I did some volunteering at their schools as well, and running off their planners and that sort of thing. But just being comfortable in a classroom really gave me a lot of confidence when I was going into particular interviews, for example, because you can talk a little bit more about what you actually done. What would you do in this situation if you had a child like this? What would you do? And you've been in the classroom enough, and I know we do lots of placement and things, but that more informal approach to you putting yourself out there, and you can say, look, well, I was doing some volunteering down at the primary school down the road, and I had this similar instance with a student, and I did this and I did that. So it just gives you a little bit more things to talk about, I'd say, in an interview, because generally they're quite stressful. But when you do get your job, it gives you a lot more confidence, because you feel in yourself that you know a lot more as well, and making sure that you're confident in yourself, that when you do get in those classroom, and trust me, when you sit in there on the first day, I remember my first day very clearly. I walked in, sat down, kids came in, they were all excited because they got a new teacher, and they all sat there and looked at me, 21 of them, and I thought to myself, uh-oh, what do I do now? No one's sitting in the back of the classroom, no one there taking notes or just there going, oh, you're right to do this. It was, these kids are up to me now. And that confidence grows, and each year you still sort of get those little nerves of, okay, well, this is my new class. I've been doing this now for sort of 7 to 8 years, and a new class every year, and it does get a lot easier. But I do distinctly remember that first day, not necessarily scary, but just having that first jump into that first day, and being prepared as possible for that first day is something that definitely still lingers with me now. So some of my sort of more top tips, I suppose I'll call them, it's funny. Sort of one of those things specifically, as I sort of already alluded to, is that volunteering aspect. The more experience that you can get between now, as in June, July time, to sort of maybe even starting the new year in sort of January time, is to volunteer as much as you can. The more time that you guys spend around students and kids in that sort of like school environment, the more prepared you will feel when you get to the start of the following academic year, when you're sitting in that classroom with those kids sitting there looking at you on day one. I did a lot of different coaching for sports, Schools are always looking for people to help out on camps or excursions to keep their ratios together. Also, as I mentioned, I had a couple of friends where I did it and I just went in and I taught their lesson plans. Somewhere where you feel comfortable. I would go in every Friday to my friend's classroom. He was okay for me to come in, and a part of what I would do is I would teach his lesson plans. He would work with other students. He would have some time to do some conferencing and some one-on-one work with particular students. And he would give me some more informal feedback and on not necessarily where you're sitting there and you're getting marked all the time. And it sort of, for me particularly, helped me a lot sort of be a bit more confident in what I was doing. And having someone who I knew quite well as well was always giving me some particular feedback, and sort of someone who I respected essentially, to give me some feedback on my own teaching practice in that time. And to be honest, that first year of your teaching, I look back at my first year now and I go, what was I doing? Was I really that, not saying a bad teacher, but was I that less prepared for what I was doing compared to what I am now, 7 or 8 years down the track? And by no means am I fully experienced by now. Another tip is when you're looking for jobs. I know when we were going through, we had these sort of portfolios and things of work of what we were sort of collecting. The schools now, and particularly in education, in international circuits, digital is one of the big things, and using the use of technology is something that they really strive for in graduates essentially. As a general rule, graduates are generally a little bit younger and have a little bit more understanding of the technology side of things. So the more things that you can sort of showcase in the way that you're integrating technology into the classroom in a more meaningful way, rather than teachers who just maybe use Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and those sorts of things. What sort of technology can you use to sort of showcase your digital portfolio essentially? And there's plenty of apps and programs out there as well that can sort of help you do that. And I'm sure you probably would have already been exposed to a few of them in your teaching practice and also at university as a part of your courses. But definitely something going digital, and as if you're not as competent in that sort of technology thing, it's sort of something I would highly recommend that you sort of start using and try to use a little bit more. Schools generally are also looking for fresh ideas and something that can reinvigorate a certain curriculum or units and that sort of thing. And generally those creative ideas come from graduates, come from guys like you who have all those new fresh ideas and that sort of thing, and that sort of brings a little bit of life back into schools. And schools need a good balance of experience and a good balance of inexperienced teachers, because that's sort of what helps them grow and continue to grow. So don't be too sort of thrown back if you're not, say, technology minded, or you don't think you have that sort of understanding. You guys do. You'll be very surprised. You use a lot of online learning platforms at school, at university now, and in schools that's talking topics. We're currently going through an online learning management system here. Creating courses online, these types of things where students can learn in different areas. So it's definitely something that you guys are probably more prepared for than say current teachers, and that's sort of something that I would recommend that you push a little bit. Definitely that's sort of the way that education's going a little bit as well, in my opinion. So the last little note on this particular slide is enjoy. University was generally some of the best years of your life. You get some time to hang out with some friends, you're going on placements, you're going to different schools. I still love doing that. I love visiting different schools, seeing what people are doing, learning off them, and enjoying your time at university, because as soon as you get started, and I know that for those first few years of education, you are so tired. And I think, after placement, you do a 2-3 week rounds and you get to the end and you're just absolutely so knackered that you're just like, how do these guys do this all the time? And as a graduate, you're just going in and picking up lessons and doing this, but it does get better. It does. You do get a bit more of a routine, and sort of know what you're talking about a little bit better. So one of the really key things is I wish I'd known sort of coming through my final years, and that is sort of to stay connected with your current classmates. There's so many ways now that you can stay connected once you leave university, and you'll be so surprised, especially in most industries, contacts and who you know gets you places. Essentially, it can help you out with a job, it can help you out with some ideas. So sort of staying connected with your classmates and connecting with other educators, not only locally but across the world. And one of the key platforms that I use for that specifically is I use Twitter. I don't have a personal Twitter account. Essentially, I only use a professional Twitter account that I use specifically for networking, connecting with other educators that I meet at different conferences or I've worked with previously, those sorts of things. So I would highly recommend creating up a professional Twitter account. Mine's Mr. Coby, quite original there, but something that I use and I follow other educators. For those who know sort of how Twitter works a little bit, you follow people, you see what they post, and you start to develop that sort of professional learning network, not just locally. A lot of my connections come from the UK, from the Middle East, America, and lots of people I haven't even met. Following on these educational blogs that people have, and that's how I sort of stay up to date with what's going on in education in general. Because you find once you sort of leave university, as much as the reading articles and that sort of thing, you sort of do get a bit over that sort of time, especially this part of your educational journey. It is nice to keep refreshing, keep your head at the game as well. And look, it's pretty easy. I sort of stay connected. I jump on Twitter every now and again and just sort of see if I can get any ideas or share out what I do in my classroom as well. It's a really, really good way to stay connected. I'll put a little note to my Twitter account if you want to jump on and have a look and follow me. But generally, definitely keep it personal and private one aside, and try and make sure that you do have your professional account. Obviously, some social media issues and that you'd probably already quite alluded to as well. So definitely stay connected with your classmates, and that's sort of now I'm starting to follow a few of my previous classmates now on Twitter, and it's really cool to see what they're up to. Not necessarily in the classroom anymore, some are in sort of different educational systems and that now as well. And a couple other things is say yes. Say yes to things, especially when you first get started. The more experience you can get in different environments and in different developing curriculum and giving ideas in little subcommittees and all those sorts of things when you get into a school, really important. But obviously you don't want to overload yourself, and no one will ever try to overload you. And if they do, sort of just say, hey, look, I'm still concentrating on this. But say yes. If there's a subcommittee coming up for something, say yes. Get involved in those sorts of things. Schools really like that. But more on a personal note, for you specifically, to understand how all aspects of the school work. Sometimes what I have seen is teachers just get very caught in their classrooms, and that's all they sort of worry about. But education in general is a broader range of things. So saying yes to different committees and different like professional learning teams and those sorts of things really helps you develop your growth. Okay, just a couple of final points now. I alluded to it a little bit earlier about my international experience as an educator, and I feel that one of the key pieces of advice is please don't be restricted specifically on jobs. Don't be restricted to the place that you want to live and you want to stay in that school for the rest of your life. As graduates, you need to get your experience, and I think it's good to go to different schools and gather different knowledge and different ways that schools work. I think that's really important. I think that's one of the really most important things that I've learned about now working at 3 schools over the past sort of 8 years. It gives you a really good understanding of different curriculum, particularly working internationally, understanding the IB curriculum, for those of you who may have looked into that a little bit, understanding different philosophies of teaching, different ways of teaching students, and don't just look at home for that. Don't just look in your neighborhood, but you want that school down the road because you know it's a really good school. Education can take you sort of wherever you want to go, and it doesn't have to necessarily be in the classroom. A lot of the people that I connect with now are either in sort of some consultancy. They're working with companies to help develop programs and things for students. You see these people that come around to schools to help and look at student well-being and all these types of educational programs. So one of the real main things is just so you just know that there are other things out there. And that's probably some of the best advice I give. There are other options. If you don't get a job straight away, there are other options. And I think that's one of the big stress for as graduates is that sort of that job aspect of things. And hopefully today's given you a little bit more of an understanding of my experience through that. And that sort of that there are other opportunities for you, not just in that key classroom job that you wanted at down the road at that best school that you've heard and that sort of thing. So, keep your options open. Get as much experience as you can. Stay connected with your classmates. And if you have any more questions or you'd like to connect with me or learn a little bit more about international education or anything, please jump on Twitter, create a professional account, connect up with me, and I'll happily answer any questions or anything. I can offer some more advice to you guys. So well done. Good luck with the journey. I hope everything goes well for you guys, and sort of the hope education for you has been as influential and rewarding as it has been for me so far in my career.